So today I'm going to be showing you how to do fabric reinforced system, mostly on EPDM roofs, but also on the like insulation board, a brand new insulation board. So the first step, make sure you take everything off the roof that doesn't belong. You might need to get up there with a shovel and bags and clean up all the dirt, loose debris, whatever. You need to do this before washing the roof. And then after you do that, you take what we call whack tube. It's a whack tube cleaner, and this is not a concentrate. It goes directly onto the roof. You take this sprayer, and we have another bigger sprayer. You take that, open it up, you open this up, and you pour it directly in. No water added at all. You pour this directly in and pump it up. And what you do, you pump this up and you spray the roof. Just make sure it's wet. You don't want to go too far out ahead. It's not good to let this necessarily dry and bake on the roof. It's actually good if you can keep it moist and wet, and that can be a little bit hard to do when the sun's shining, but it is good. Don't go too far out ahead and keep it wet after you put it on. So that is step number 1. Step number 2, after you put the whack 2 on, is you hook this pressure washer up and basically hook the pressure washer up, make sure there's water, turn it on, and you run the hose up, pressure washer hose up on the top of the roof, and you're going to be washing the EPDM roof with this. This is a little bit long, but you'll probably be using a shorter one. But you wash the roof, use a turbo nozzle, and power wash that roof. You want to make sure that this is pretty clean. One test that you can do is after it's dry, take your finger, wipe the rubber, and see if you're coming up with any type of residue. You do want to make sure this is pretty clean. You are getting adhesion to the roof with a coating and a tack coat. So if you have dirt on the roof and that dirt decides to loosen, your coating is going to go with it. Make sure it's clean. It is important to keep this step pretty particular. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is where we are applying tack coat to the roof. This is like a primer. After you've put whack 2 and pressure washed it, this is where you're going to start spraying. This goes on pretty thin. I don't know if you can see it. This is your black roof, EPDM roof, and then the primer. If you're putting this on insulation board, you can ignore this step. But if you are putting this on EPDM, make sure you put this primer down. It doesn't go on thick. This comes, most times we use 55-gallon drums, sometimes 5-gallon buckets. You can even roll this on. You don't want globs, but you do want to make sure it's sprayed on, not thick, but not too thin either. It goes on a little more like a paint, and that is going to get applied. Turn the pressure down a little bit, maybe even use a little bit of a smaller tip when you're spraying this, and just spray it down. That is your step number 3. So after you've put whack 2 on, you pressure washed, you've tack coated the roof. Somewhere along here, you want to walk the roof and make sure all your EPDM is solid. If there's any loose EPDM, you want to take a screw that's long enough, and this can vary depending on how thick the insulation is under the rubber, and you want to take a 3-inch plate and put them together like that, and then screw the whole way down through any place that's loose. After this is done, you've basically created a leak point where if water is going to sit here, you're going to have a leak. So you want to make sure after this is done and before it rains again that these are completely sealed. You can do this a couple different ways. If you want to do just a real emergency seal, you can put 360 over top. Quick caulk will not hold, just quick caulk will not hold without fabric or anything. You make sure it's dry before you put the 360 on. Put a glob of 360 on this. Otherwise, you will have a leak, and you want to make sure you take care of that before it rains again. So that's your step number 4. Okay, step number 5, after you pressure washed, whack 2, tack coated, and also made sure any rubber is, loose rubber is fastened down, you will want to go over all the seams. So the seams actually get double fabric. They get reinforced with fabric before we do the whole roof. Now, these are not your factory seams. These are the seams that were actually done on the roof, and you can tell the difference. The factory seams are really tight. The other ones actually you'll be able to see the difference between the two. But what you do after your tack coat's on, you will go and you'll spray just a real thin layer of or a real narrow width of base coat. You want to use base coat for this. You'll spray maybe 6 inches, maybe 6 to 12 inches wide. You'll do the seam, spray that down, and you'll take a piece of fabric. If the seam is narrow enough that you can use 4-inch, just the regular 4-inch fabric, that's what we use. If you need something wider, we cut some of our bigger rolls into different widths, 12 inches, 18 inches, or whatever you need. You can usually find it. So you spray that down. You spray down the base coat. You lay this fabric into the base coat, the wet base coat. The person that's spraying after the fabric is laid comes back and he sprays on top of the fabric. Make sure that fabric is coated on top as well as below. There's a person coming from behind with a brush or a roller, whatever works. But his job is to just simply brush the coating into the fabric. This is very important that you don't leave any wrinkles in the fabric. The person that's brushing has to make sure he pulls any wrinkles out. You may need to actually take your finger and push and pull some of the wrinkles. You want to lay it in loose. You don't want to like lay it in the fabric tight. But then his job is going to make sure that he brushes in the fabric and that there's no wrinkles. Any wrinkles that are in the fabric afterward, you have to go back and cut. So this can be a step where if you're particular, you can actually eliminate some of that work later on. Step number 6 is where you are going to be basically putting fabric on the whole roof instead of just the seams like we did on the previous step where you did just the seams. And then after that's done, you will take a larger roll, and we have these 3, or this is a 6-foot roll. If you can go bigger, it saves time. Use a bigger roll. Sometimes you have a little more narrow spaces where you got to use, it's more practical to use a small roll. And then there's even times when you have to do corners and stuff with a cut roll like this where you can cut it to any size. Sometimes 18 inches, 2 feet, whatever you need there. But it's the same process as the previous step. It's just on a bigger scale where, again, you make sure you have tack coat on it. The tack coat, you need to keep that on fresh within 24 to 36 hours. But make sure that there's tack coat on the roof, and what you do is you'll spray a bigger width, whatever width you're rolling out. If that's a 6-foot roll, you will spray down a path 6 foot wide, and you'll start to roll this out. And there's a few tricks you got to learn with that, but basically you'll be spraying 6 foot wide. The guy might go 10, 20 feet and do just a path 6 foot wide. He sprays it down decently thick, not crazy, just enough to get some stick. And then the person that is rolling this, he rolls out the fabric. The person behind him, he rolls out the fabric. The guy spraying comes back. He sprays on top of the fabric, so he's spraying below and on top of the fabric. And then there is a guy, again, with a roller that is back rolling everything. And it's very important that he back rolls it. You want this is where the guy that's back rolling is actually responsible to make sure to get it thick enough and to yell at the guy that's spraying to go thicker or thinner, whatever is needed. So he's rolling it out. He's making sure any wrinkle in the fabric is out, and you can usually do that with the roller. You can work the wrinkles out. Sometimes you might need to get down on your hands and knees and actually pull them out depending how much they are, but make sure all the wrinkles in the fabric are out and that you have a nice smooth surface afterward. That is your step number 6. Okay, so after you have coated the whole roof, all the surface, you put fabric down on all the surface. You want to make sure you get all the corners and stuff. I didn't mention that in the last step. Make sure you get all the corners with any little fabric or whatever. After that's dry, you are going to be going over the roof. Okay, so we want to make sure that this roof is leak free, that you don't have leaks. That's the whole goal of this thing, is to make sure that it's leak free. So what we're gonna do is we're literally going to walk pretty much every square foot of the roof. If there are any wrinkles in the fabric, you take a knife, you cut them out, and you quick caulk those. And the way you do that, you take a bucket like this or a bucket like this, whatever size you want. If you're a macho man, you can go with the big stuff. You think you're macho anyway. So what you do is you'll take this and again cut out any wrinkles in the fabric, and you take a brush and you quick caulk any type of hole, crack, wrinkle that you cut out. And we actually caulk over some of the sides. If where you go up to the fabric, what you'll do is caulk those. We will caulk any of the walls, the seams on the walls. Sometimes we do that process where we'll take quick caulk and we will caulk all the seams in the walls. So that's a pretty important step, and again, you have to make sure you take the time that you need to do this correctly, and be pretty particular with this, because this is a pretty important step to make sure that customer doesn't have any leaks after this process is done. So the final step is top coat, and that's the funnest, basically the funnest step in the whole process. So after, and up to this point, you should pretty much have it sealed. The roof should be 100% waterproof if you did your job correctly, if you did all your details correctly. You're gonna have, it's gonna look blue, the roof will look blue with maybe some brown spots with quick caulk on them where you did the touch up. So top coat, before you start spraying, you take a bucket or somehow you figure out how to get the edges straight. Most of the time we do this way. We take a bucket, just a bucket like this, we put top coat in it, and we take a brush and we will brush all the edges. And that includes the outside edges on the roof, that includes any inside edges around any units, any pipes. You don't just spray these or your edges are gonna look all crooked. You wanna make sure that edge looks nice and straight, get a really nice professional job on this. You take your brush and either you snap a line, or if you have a natural line somewhere where you can make that edge straight, that's how you do it. After that is done, you will be spraying top coat. The funnest part, the final step on this whole thing, and it comes in a drum kind of like this. You'll put it in the trailer, set it up with the sprayer. We'll have a video on how to do that, but you'll set it up in the sprayer and take the hose up on the roof, and you want to get this pretty thick, so you're spraying the whole roof white, and make sure it's approximately 3,000 to 3,200 square feet per 55-gallon drum. You might want to go first when you're starting and you're learning how to spray, is measure 3,200 square feet, make some marks on the roof, and put a brand new drum in the trailer and get started with a brand new drum, and go and spray that 3,200 square feet and see how much of this used, because most times, most guys tend to get it a little too thin when they're just starting out. So make sure you get that thick enough. When you're spraying, you want to see just a little bit of a, what we call an orange peel, a little bit of a bubbling on the top coat. And another thing with this, and this is just all learning how to spray, get that consistent spray, because when you're spraying, it's really bright and you can't always see it. Get that consistent spray, make sure your pattern is consistent and you're covering everything, because if you get it a little thin at one spot, you're gonna have to come back. You'll see some blue coming through because you didn't quite get it thick enough. So that's a pretty important thing, to make sure it gets thick enough. You don't want to just be dumping it on the roof, but at the same time, you want to get it thick enough to where you're actually getting the coverage that you need. So with that, that's your final step, and after that, you should have a nice roof. Yay!